Every time you hear of a teenager having a baby, you doubt whether or not her parent is a narc. Rebecca, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to respond to your entire commentary. I'm also going to include your comment in its entirety in the description of this video because I think that these are important conversations to have. And I also want to say that in my case, as my mother is actually a sociopath and a narcissist, and I'm going to get to that later on because you addressed that directly in your comment. It wouldn't matter if she was or wasn't. What actually matters is that my mother was extremely emotionally violent and abusive towards me, and abusive in other ways as well. But what had the greatest, most devastating impact on who I became as a teenager, a child, a young adult, even to this point in my life, because I suffer from complex PTSD as a direct result of my mother's abuse and other abuses that she exposed me to. It doesn't matter if she is a narcissist or a sociopath. It matters that she's toxic, unwilling to heal our relationship at the time when she had the opportunity to do so, unwilling to work on herself, unwilling to show up with kindness, unwilling to respect boundaries, and unwilling to be a good role model for my children who are now adults. So also, as a person who had my baby when I was 17, my first daughter, I'm a mother of 3 and a grandmother of 2. And I actually also, at some point in my life when I was married, I had a blended family with 5 children under the age of 9. So I speak from the experience of having been a motherless daughter because my mother never treated me like I was her daughter. She treated me like I was something that was a tool to her, a plaything, and even tried to unalive me at some point. I'm speaking as a grandmother. I'm speaking as a mother, and I'm also speaking as a therapist who works day in and day out with adult survivors of narcissistic abuse, particularly. Like, this is what I do every day, all day. And not every survivor that comes to me has a parent who is a diagnosable narcissist. But every client who comes to me does have a parent who falls somewhere in the spectrum of emotional immaturity to the point of causing severe emotional distress and damage to their adult child throughout their childhood, up until when they come to me, or there might be no contact at that point, or they might be low contacts, or they might have figured out a way to navigate some of what is going on so that they're no longer traumatized to the level that they once were by their toxic parent. We'll go with toxic, okay? All right, so I'm going to break down your comment and address it, well, paragraph by paragraph. Here we go. Every time I hear that a teenager has a baby when she is 17, it gives me doubt as to whether the parent was really a narc and whether the real issue was the teenager wanted to do what they wanted to do. And the parent was besides themselves, I'm sorry, I can't help, I need to add in the tone, expressing their anxieties and concerns in a way that was heavy-handed, unkind, and maybe cruel in their bluntness, because their child was simply not listening and the parent was watching them head off of a cliff and were at their wits' end. As adults, parents already have life experience, and that life experience should give them a level of maturity to understand that being cruel and unkind isn't the way that you support and redirect a child's behavior. Teenagers are children. They are naive, they are innocent, and they also think that they are all powerful. Our brains don't reach adult development until we're about 26 years old. You probably didn't know that. And while we're teaching our teenagers responsibility and how to make good decisions for themselves and how to love themselves, because that's where good decisions come from, self-love. Doing so by tearing them down, and this, I can't remember how you put it, I need to look at it again. Cruel in their bluntness. That, Rebecca, is toxic and emotionally abusive. And look, I'm not talking about the one-ofs where sometimes we as parents lose our minds. I'm talking about a pattern of behavior that a parent exhibits, trying to bully their child into doing the right thing instead of trying to support their child and teaching them that they have value and deserve to do the right thing. And I'm going to go on. Here we go. You have so much to say. It's just mind-blowing to me. Whew. A 17-year-old should be focused on schooling, future employment, and preparing to leave the parents' home. Preparing for life, not having sex and getting pregnant, and bringing an innocent into the world when they are not prepared to handle themselves, let alone on a child on top of it. Guess what? I actually agree with you 100% on this. Totally agree with you. These are all the should-haves that should be happening for a teenager. They should be enjoying life. They should be developing. They should be going on to university. They should be enjoying homecomings and proms and all of these different things. And also, they are innocents. They are still children. I'm going to double down on that. So I absolutely agree with you. And whether or not they should be having sex, well, teenagers are going to have sex. Not all of them, but a lot of them are going to have sex. And it's up to us as parents to give them what they need so that they can have safe S. I had to bleep out the word because I don't want to get knocked around on social media. And sometimes when we say certain things, videos get taken down. So that's why I'm saying S, not because I have a problem with talking about physical intimacy or anything like that. You know, children have high school sweethearts. They have actual relationships when they are teenagers, and they become active. I have 3 adult children who thankfully didn't end up with pregnancies in their teenage years, and I'm really grateful for that. And I think part of the reason why is because they had a mom and dad that they could come to, that we dealt with birth control, we dealt with STDs in terms of education and prevention, and giving them the ability to make decisions later rather than sooner. So my kids weren't like 13, 14, 15 having S. My kids were actually older teenagers, one of which was 19 the first time. And that was because they had a lot of love at home. And while I was at times an emotionally immature parent because I'm a trauma survivor who didn't go to therapy, which was my job, my children suffered because of that. Fortunately, they didn't suffer so much that they felt unloved or unworthy. And I think part of that had to do with the fact that when I would lose my mind, not that cruel bluntness garbage you're talking about, and not even the unkindness that you're talking about, sometimes just lose my cool, I would come back and own that and repair that because it was wrong. If I had been more emotionally mature, there are times where I would have prioritized my children in a way that I should have, that I can't take back now. Fortunately, because of the love and the openness and the communication in our relationship, it didn't deteriorate their self-esteem. And when children have their self-esteem deteriorated, when they don't feel good about themselves, when they're not given the love that they deserve to be given, when they are looking for acceptance, a lot of times, particularly for teenage girls and even younger, the easiest way to find that is through physical intimacy, not understanding that that's not what love is. It's a byproduct when you're an adult. Anyway, I do agree with your statement for the most part. So let's go on to the next one. As a parent, if I observe that my child is neglecting to do what they need to do to take care of themselves, still continue in their ways despite my efforts to redirect them, and they are on the cusp of adulthood with an innocent on the way, I would be out of my mind with worry and concern for both my child and my grandchild. Yes, I would want to draw my grandchild near because they are an innocent, and I already know my child makes bad decisions and is unprepared to raise a child. She is still raising her young adult self. She's raising her young adult self because it sounds like you stopped raising her and started judging her if you were in this situation. I don't know if you've actually been in this situation. So you would prefer to create a wedge between yourself and your adult child or teenage child that much more by pulling in your grandchild and creating a wedge between the grandchild and their own mother. And you think that that is somehow acceptable and protective. It's not. That isn't building up your teenager. It isn't giving them the tools that they need to be a better parent. It isn't supportive. It isn't helpful. And it's actually really detrimental to the relationship that they are probably trying to form, hopefully trying to form with their child. And of course, they're going to be emotionally immature because guess what? They are an innocent and they are a child. And now they've had their childhood cut short by having a child. And here you are, instead of finding better ways to support your teenager, you're obviously on the attack on them. Like you're obviously looking down on them and angry at them. You sound actually pretty aggressive and toxic, really. You sound like a parent who should be going into therapy if you do have a teenager who's pregnant to learn how to support them and redirect them. We don't redirect with cruelty. We redirect with kindness, with support. And look, sometimes it's not going to work because guess what? Sometimes teenagers are just going to do what they're going to do and they don't have the emotional maturity. Destroying and devaluing their relationship with their child isn't going to make that better. It's actually going to make it worse. Let's move on to the next part. Whew. Yes, I want to be sure that if something is going on at her home, that my grandchild would be comfortable telling me so I can intervene if I need to. So you want your grandchild to come to you so that you can intervene. I wonder what that looks like. I do think that our children should be able to come to the trusted adults in their lives. And I think that as trusted adults, we're supposed to make sure that when they do that, we aren't doing something to undermine the relationship that they have with their parent. This is a very sticky area here. Very sticky area. If one of my grandchildren came to me and said, Mommy and Daddy are doing this or that or the other, I would definitely have a conversation with my grandchild. And I would definitely say to them, well, you know, we need to talk about this further with Mommy or Daddy. And I'm sorry that you're feeling that way. And, you know, let's solve this. Let's do something better with this, you know, and make sure that they know that you're coming together as a team, all together, to make things better. And I'm not talking about child abuse, by the way. There are situations that isn't possible. However, the way that you're doing this isn't that. Your comment, because of the context, really reeks of somebody who is creating a toxic division, because it doesn't sound like you like your teenager. And that's a problem in and of itself. And children pick up on that. They pick up on how people are interacting. They learn primarily when they're younger through observation. And if we are role modeling any sort of toxic behavior and we are people that these children love, they start to think that love and toxic cruelty, you know, blunt cruelty, truth, all and kindness and everything is a part of what love is, and it's not. I'm going to carry on. But narcissism has to meet very, very specific criteria, and the pattern of behaviors you will see is actually quite predictable regardless of type. So if you want to know whether a person you are dealing with is really a narcissist or not, give yourself the gift of time. Go into observer mode and always listen to your instincts. How much time? Give yourself the gift of time. How much time? How much time do you need to stay in a toxic relationship to figure out that it's unhealthy for yourself and for your child. How much time? So your comment was on a video where I was talking about, toxic grandparents, my experience with my mother, who is a sociopath and a narcissist. And again, we'll get into that in a minute. But how much time? How much time? When is enough enough? I think that people should give themselves the gift of not accepting toxicity and not engaging in relationships that cause trauma and harm. And we don't need to stick around to see whether or not somebody is a narcissist to understand that somebody else's behavior isn't healthy, it isn't kind, it isn't safe, it isn't loving, and that if that person has had boundaries set for them and expressions of, look, you're doing this and it's hurting me, and they are carrying on, it doesn't matter if they're a narcissist or not. It just matters that they're not willing to do the things to be a kind, loving, safe person. So the gift of time, well, that is just BS. And I'll tell you why also it's BS. That gift of time is really something that the toxic person is benefiting from. And the child who is in the middle of that situation is actually experiencing stress from, is being mistreated or misled in terms of what love looks like and that sort of thing. It's just giving that toxic person more ground to dig their heels into with that child and get deeper into that relationship with that child while being toxic to that child's parent, confusing that child. And then when we decide that we're not going to allow that to continue because the boundaries aren't being respected, the longer it goes on, guess what? The more hurtful it's going to be for that child. I went no contact with my mother when my daughter was 6, my eldest daughter, and my son was 2. And I wish I had done it sooner, but I was given the gift of time, not understanding who and what my mother was at the time. I didn't know that she could or could not change. I just know that she wasn't, and that she was being cruel, and that she was mistreating my children. Having one child be a golden child and the other one be a non-existent child and triangulating them against each other, that is mistreating both children. My daughter, who is now 41 years old, actually told me that she learned what guilt felt like because of my mother, that she ties it back to those experiences because she felt like there was something wrong with her, that she was being treated so well in some sort of way because she saw her brother being mistreated and she couldn't understand why she was so preferred and wanted to be different so that her little brother could shine a little bit. She felt bad for him. She felt bad for me because she saw how my mother was treating me. She felt bad for her step-grandfather because she saw how my mother was treating her. My mother was either venomous or ignoring each and every person in the household except for her golden grandchild. She was doing harm. And it saddens me to know that my daughter had to learn about guilt at the age of 6. It saddens me that my daughter had to learn about trust and distrust and being sneaky and lying and things like that at the age of 6 from a person that she looked up to and admired. My mother would expose her to adult sorts of movies like Poltergeist and Dirty Dancing and tell my daughter to lie to me that this was their special time. Doesn't matter if my mother is a sociopath or a narcissist. It matters that that behavior is absolutely abusive and toxic. It matters that my little girl was exposed to a certain amount of S because of Dirty Dancing that she should not have been exposed to. It matters that she was having meltdowns and nightmares because of horror movies, which is how I found out what my mother was doing, by the way. All right, let's go on to the next line. Oof. Oh, I just don't even know. I don't even know how you have the energy to have all these thoughts or how I have all the energy to address them. Now, I am not negating this woman's experience. Yes, you are. I have no idea what was going on in her childhood or home. But there is more to this situation than meets the eye and what we are being told. Rebecca, I have well over 1,000 videos on this channel alone with the backstory. And actually, I'm going to put the link to my TED Talk or TEDx talk on here as well. That you can get the whole background there. But you know, earlier when you were talking about how teenagers should be being teenagers and not having S and all that and going to high school, yeah, I was on the streets at 13 because my mother is a sociopath and a narcissist. My earliest memories of her, well, once she threw me out of, or dropped me, I want to be technically correct, she dropped me out of a 2-story window trying to unalive me for financial gain. That's pretty sociopathic. And you know what? My bones healed. The rest of me, well, I have complex PTSD. I'm going to have this for the whole rest of my life. I'm going to have times where I have to deal with anxiety that I wouldn't have otherwise because of all the things that my mother did to me. She gave me to somebody who CSA'd me, starting with my grandfather, and then another guy, a lifeguard at a pool, and she knew it was happening and she kept sending me back. That's also pretty sociopathic. She spent all of her energy and time ripping me apart. Closet raids and rages. She makes Mommy Dearest look like a saint. And if you really wanted to know about my background while you were throwing all this blame and judgment and shame my way, because this is on my video, you would have done so. Pretty toxic behavior. Yours, not mine. Just in case you were wondering. What I do know is if a person is expressing truth that is supported by facts, even if they are expressing it in a very harsh way, or in a way that you're not feeling love or they're concerned for you, that is not necessarily narcissism. Yes, it might be hurtful, but blunt truth often hurts. Boy, you really like that word blunt, don't you? We can deliver truth to our children. We can be honest in conversations without being so blunt that it's actually abusive and cruel. It's probably something you might want to learn to do, or maybe not. But I can't imagine ever tolerating a relationship or allowing my children to tolerate a relationship with someone who is hiding their cruelty under the blunt truth. You see, my children know better because they don't associate pain with love. And when I have to tell my children something that maybe is going to cause them discomfort, not pain, I let them know. And I have conversations, particularly with my 41-year-old daughter, because she calls me for, guess what, parenting advice of her 2 teenagers, boys who haven't made babies and hopefully won't until they're mature enough and ready. But hey, something like, hopefully not. We're just not even going to put that into the universe. She calls me for parenting advice. And sometimes I have to tell her something she doesn't want to hear. Or sometimes I have to handle it in a way of, well, what do you think you should do? And try to empower her and try to build up her confidence in those situations. And she does that because I was her mom when she was a teenager. And while I didn't get everything right, I got lots of things right. And while I was not getting everything right, she knew that she was safe and loved. And that doesn't come from blunt, cruel truth. It doesn't. And when I have to deliver a message to her that I know is going to hurt her feelings, I'm really careful in how I do that. And we don't get off of the FaceTime or whatever it is, it's usually FaceTime, until we've talked it all the way through and have some sort of resolution. Because I never want my daughter to feel or walk away from me feeling torn down by me. I want her to feel supported and loved. And that is a decision we make in the way that we communicate and demonstrate through can't even talk, through constructive communication. Remember, we're the adults in the room, right? Well, my 41-year-old's an adult. We're the adults with all the experience. I mean, you really made a point to say that. Yet it sounds like you have devolved yourself down into being someone who doesn't know any better or doesn't have more maturity than a teenager. That's what it sounds to me. It sounds to me like you're quite emotionally immature. And that's not me judging you. That's just me pointing out what you're demonstrating in this comment. Just because a parent says something that hurts your feelings or has a good relationship with their grandchild, but not with you, and you might be feeling put out or some other kind of way about it, that doesn't necessarily make the parent a narcissist. No, but it makes them toxic as F. Because if you aren't aware enough to role model what love and kindness looks like for your grandchild in how you treat their parent, who should be the most important person in the world to them, well, you may not be a narcissist, but you're definitely toxic and unaware of what your actual responsibility is to your grandchild. Treating your adult child or your teenage child who had a child with unkindness and cruelty and disrespect and a lack of respect of boundaries. By the way, boundaries and respect are a two-way street. They're not your property. And modeling that for their child is going to make their parenting of that child exponentially more difficult, because you're teaching your grandchild that there's something wrong with their parent and that they should treat their parent the way that you do. And I shall just leave you with that. Have the kind of day that you deserve, Rebecca. I know I will be. Take care.